Welcome to the Mobility Innovators Podcast.
Hello everyone, I'm so happy to welcome all listeners from around the world to Mobility Innovators Podcast. I'm your host, Jaspal Singh. Mobility Innovator Podcast invite key innovators in the transportation and logistics sector to share their thought about the key changes in the sector, about their work, and what is their forecast for the future. Today, I'll be speaking with an amazing corporate innovator. He's currently head of innovation at RATP Group, a state-owned public transport operator and maintainer headquartered in Paris, France. The RATP Group is the world's third largest public transport company, carrying 16 million people every day in 14 countries through 107 subsidiaries around the world. He has 15 years of experience in the public sector, including Ministry of Defense and French National Authority for Cybersecurity, as well as working in the private sector with brands like Orange and Trusted Logic on the topic of cybersecurity and digital transformation. Prior to joining RATP, he was the Chief Technology Officer of the state within the inter-ministerial digital department. After having worked with Secretary of State for Digital as an advisor in charge of digital trust and state digital transformation, I'm so happy to welcome Côme Berbain, Head of Innovation at RATP Group. Now it's time to listen and learn. Hello, Côme. Thank you so much for joining us on the show. I'm really looking forward to our conversation today.
Hi, thanks for inviting me.
So today I'll be spending time getting to know more about you, your work at RATP, and your thought on innovation in the mobility sector. To begin with, I would like you to share some fun fact with our listener. And also, are there any interesting facts about your career that are not on LinkedIn?
Yes, there is. I dedicate a little bit of my time in preparing the next generation of scientists and French civil servants. I teach a lot at the beginning of my career. I still do some teaching. I do less and less because of the professional activity, but I try to maintain a little bit of teaching in engineering school. And I teach, I have a lesson on autonomous mobility. I also participate in the evaluation of the civil servants of what we call the Institut National du Service Public, which is the institute that trained the future executive on French states on digital and public transformation. And, it's not really my main focus, but I think it's important to do that, to train the next generation so that they can directly have the best ideas that we have developed. And it's also very interesting to, when you teach something, you always learn yourself.
Oh, yeah.
And I love that exercise.
That's a great point. I fully agree with you. When you teach something, you learn yourself, and actually you need to prepare before teaching, because in today's world, the students are much smarter. So you get some of the smartest questions from these young students, which force you to go back and learn. So thanks for sharing that. And I really appreciate what you're doing, preparing the next generation and teaching them and sharing your knowledge, the practical experience from the world. Now, you did your master in computer science at École Polytechnique, and later you did your Ph.D. in cryptography from University of Paris and Orange. After that, you started your career as a security expert in various government departments. You serve as a Chief Technology Officer of State within inter-ministerial digital department. And in 2019, I think you decided to join RATP as a head of innovation. So I'm curious to know why this career move, because you were doing great in the public sector. You're working on some exciting project. What excites you to join RATP? And what does your typical day look like at RATP?
So, as you said, I spent almost 15 years in cybersecurity, digital transformation, starting from classical engineering stuff, research, code, making technical projects. And then I evolved to management, strategy, and politics. And so I did a lot of things in this field of digital. And at some point, I was thinking I need to apply that to something, to a sector that is involved in I think, what are the two big challenges of the time, the digital transformation and the climate change. And if you look at the existing sectors, the mobility sector is exactly at the heart of these two challenges. The digital is making that move and change, and we see new forms of mobility every day. And in the same time, mobility is a huge part of the CO2 emissions we have today. And so it's a perfect place to try to change things and allow the society and people to have a cleaner way to move. And the digital is one of the elements that can accelerate that. And so I started to look at this mobility sector, and then quite quickly I found RATP, which is a great choice. We have a long tradition of innovation with the pneumatic metro, the first automatic metros, with the dematerialized tickets in the 90s. And we are, of course, very famous for Paris, but yeah, we're now in 700 cities in the globe. We are in London, we are in Tuscany, in Casablanca, in Cairo, in Hong Kong, in Washington. We are everywhere in the world. So it's a great place to work. And we clearly are at the center of this climate change and digital transformation. A typical day, well, I'm not sure there's a typical day. Typical days look like a long series of helping people. People from my teams trying to solve a problem they have on the last experimentation we're trying to build, or the innovation we are crafting. And this is all kinds of problems. It can be technical, it can be administrative, it can be buying strategy or market strategy. Every day is different. It can be a legal problem too. We had lots of discussions about how can we legally use cameras and AI. It's one of the hot subjects we have now. So helping my team, helping our business units. They have problems. They're trying to figure out how they can solve them. And we look at what the innovation tools, what the methods we have, what the partners we know, and try to give them a new way of looking at the problems they have. And usually lots of the innovations we create, it's helping the people from business units to look differently at the problem they have. And because usually they already, before coming to see us, they already tried lots of things. So retrying the same thing is not very clever. But trying to say, okay, let's look at the problem differently. Let's bring a new partner around the table. Let's take a look at a different technology, for example, is usually one of the key components to make that. And after that, I try to save a little bit of my time to meeting people from the ecosystem and reading about innovation in the world, what are other people are doing. And in the mobility sector, but also outside of the mobility sector. You probably know the concept of serendipity. Yeah, you need to cultivate that. You need to take every day a little bit of your time to look at different things. And what are our competitors doing? What are other people in the mobility industry doing? What are other people in other fields are doing? And you clearly see that it's a great source of innovation and having this ability to look at things differently.
Oh yeah, I mean, I can say after listening to you that you always have an interesting day, because you are dealing with so many problems, like you mentioned, not only the technology side, but also the policy legal side. But I love your point about having some time every day to talk to people in the ecosystem, also not only from mobility, but outside and reading. I think that's very important, because a lot of time people don't read and don't try to learn what's happening around them, and they miss the new wave or new innovation and all. So as your role as an innovation head, you need to do that, because then only you can tell other people that how you can do. But that's great. In fact, my follow-up question is something you recently mentioned. You recently mentioned that innovation is one of the pieces of RATP DNA. And in fact, I like the tagline which RATP publish everywhere. It's RATP loves startups, which is a small code, but a great line, because it shows that it's love innovation, it's love new idea, it's accept different perspective. Currently, there are 180 projects going on within RATP involving 140 partners, including startup, university, incubator, manufacturers, industry partner, like you mentioned. So can you briefly share about the structure of innovation department within RATP, given that the group has so many different subsidiaries? You mentioned that you have more than 100 subsidiaries across the globe. So how this innovation department can work with so many different subsidiaries? And can you share the engagement model with the startup, like how you engage with these startups? Because that's one of the key point a lot of authorities face challenge is how to engage with these innovation companies and innovators.
So on the organization, we're not very innovative in that. We have a central team that deals with the strategy, the governance, the main innovation programs we have on autonomous mobility, on smart city, on AI and robotics, and that deals with the innovation methods and tools that we can mutualize.
Okay.
Like innovation labs, the startups, the participatory innovation. And then we have people in all the business units that makes the link between that central team and the operational team on the ground. And some of them have themselves little teams locally, or they're having some other people helping them. That's really depending on which business unit we're working on, and it's very different from when you're a small city in France, or when you are in the engineering department here in Paris. It's clearly not the same thing, and we need to adapt to that. But in all of that, you can create innovation, not the same kind of innovation, but you can create innovation adapted to the business unit and to the local subsidiary that you're working with. And clearly, the key element is how you make the information moves between all those people, and that's a real challenge to do that at the scale of a group like we have. On the startups, today what we do with startups is that we try to help them accelerate. So every year we make calls. We start from our problems and we describe those problems and we make calls and saying, come and help us solving those problems.
Yeah.
And then we have a lot of candidates. Like this year we had more than 200 candidates on the problems. And then we select the startups that we want, that where we can do something together. It doesn't mean the startup is not valuable. It doesn't mean they're doing bad thing or whatever. The question is, can we do something together?
Yeah.
And once we have made this selection, then we start an innovation project with them, starting by verifying the value, verifying how the technology is working, and making the first steps, like usually a first experiment. And if it's working, then we can make, have the classical innovation stream, making bigger and bigger steps, and finally going for a full product if it's possible. We learned that sometimes it's not that easy to work with really early startups.
Yeah.
For two reasons. They're very early and we are very big. So it means we are very slow. And we learned that it's not helping them to work directly with them. So we love early startups because they are inspiring us.
Yeah.
And we try to focus more on a little bit more mature startups where they already have a product and we can really make a project together. And it's okay for them if making a decision take 2 months. And if you do that within very early startups, the risk is killing them. And we don't want to do that. So really the question is, finding startups we can help grow, help accelerate. And something which is mutually valuable is they have a new perspective, they have new solutions, but we have lots of experts.
Yeah.
And experts that will help them to understand what are the real constraints on existing systems. And when you mix those two elements, then you can make really great things. You have the startups bringing freshness, new ideas, new ways of looking, and in the same time, the experts, they can help solving the other problems, which are not the core of the problem, but this is real acceleration for the startups to go to real solutions that works on the field.
Now, these are great points. In fact, I can see some similarity with Transport for London, because they also say the first thing they ask a question to a startup is that, do you have a runway for 6 months? Because like you said, in the big organization, it takes time to move things. And it's nothing wrong. In big organization, you need to take care of a lot of things, a lot of corporate governance issues. And so you need to make sure that the startup can have that much of runway to grow. And I like your point. You don't want to discourage anybody, but you want to make sure there is a product and that product can be used. And bringing the innovation with the expertise is very important, because sometimes I meet these founders and I find that they have no clue about the reality of how the real world works, because they think they can change everything, but there are a lot of things in the back end which is difficult to change. So thanks for sharing these points. And I love the way you structure, you launch this accelerator call, get so many 200 entries. And I can imagine it must be a very tough call to decide 10 or 15 entries from this 200, because everything look exciting. And as an innovator, you feel so curious to learn about different solutions, but you have to stop yourself and say, which one will work?
Yeah, clearly. And something which is tough as an innovator is to kill projects. But
yeah.
you need to know to do that. At some point, it's better for everyone to say, okay, it's not working.
Yeah.
It doesn't bring the value we wanted to have. It's okay. Learn what did we learn? We learned something. That's a success. Let's celebrate that. But let's go to something else.
Yeah.
And that's something we are, it's every day we're learning to do that, trying to kill projects properly. It's really, really, really difficult, but it's really mandatory. You cannot do anything.
Yeah. No, and it's the most difficult part, like you mentioned. And now my next question is about the innovation culture within the RATP group. Like you mentioned, it's a big group. It's so many subsidiaries and so many functions are there. But I love what the RATP did. They structured their innovation around 4 sectors. One is about everyday innovation, which affect the traveler. Second is about invent the city of tomorrow, so focusing on smart city, technology and all. The third point is about decarbonize mobility and city. And fourth is to improve industrial site. And I saw that RATP has such a big function of engineering, construction, mechanical side. So they are improving the industrial side as well. So how these 4 areas are covering all key functional area of RATP? And also, can you share some interesting innovative projects in these areas? One you are doing or one you are exploring, because it will be important for startup to know what are the area RATP is focusing on now and what are you looking some solution for the future?
Yeah, so with these 4 pillars, we cover pretty much everything we do. So the first one is innovation for day-to-day travelers. It's really how can we make their life easier? How can we reduce the exploitation problems we have? And on that, it's really focusing on the user experience. And then you can have innovation on all parts of that. You can have innovation when people enter the subway, for example, or once they are inside, how can you guide them? How can you have a better management on the problems that we face every day? Because you can do lots of things to avoid those problems, like predictive maintenance, and we do a lot of that. But still, at some point, there are problems that happens. So how do you manage that? How do you help people getting a new opportunity, a new way of moving if you have some problem somewhere? And really, that's working on giving them the good information at the good time and the good place. And it seems to be easy to say, but it's really, really difficult to do. The second pillar is a long-term effort. It's the question of what will be cities in 10 years or 20 years. And on that, we clearly are mobility operator, and we work, for example, on autonomous mobilities with shuttles, trams, and buses. But it's also a question on how we shape cities. Mobility is a city shaper, and we have developed through the years expertise on construction of buildings. We started by building houses on top of bus depot, for example. And today we make more and more complex constructions, mixing houses, offices, or industrial sites inside of cities. And this is really big questions about what will be cities in 20 years? How do you adapt cities to climate change? How do you reduce the public space for cars, and how do you improve it for public transportation? So this is really long-term subjects, but they are really, really interesting to look at. The third subject is linked to that. It's the question of decarbonation. How do we reduce CO2 emissions? How do you create more public transport? How to help poor people? How do you reduce the emissions of public transport? And we have a lot of efforts on buses with bio-CNG, electric buses, and we start to have hydrogen buses. And even on top of that, it's really a question of how do you help cities to decarbonize? How do you are able to add trees inside of the cities? We are a part of that. We're not doing that alone, but we can be a part of that. And cities desperately looks for solutions. So we can provide some of the solutions. And the last subject is we are an industrial company. And we're an industrial company in the middle of cities. So it means our industrial tools are so constrained. You know, it's not like you're a car company, you have plants 20 kilometers from whatever cities, you can do whatever, you have lots of spaces, you can put robots and whatever. We're not. Some of our plants are down under the earth. It means just to bring the elements, to bring a machine, to bring a robot is complicated. And in the same time, it brings a lot of constraints, and from constraints grows innovation. So we have huge subjects on that, on innovation, on tackling this specificity, but also on classical industry innovation, 5G, BIM, robots, 3D printing. It's all, I mean, classic stuff for industry innovation, but it's a great field of innovation for us.
These all are great points, and I love what you shared, that example of building housing over the bus depot. I know there are a couple of sites in Paris where RATP is doing that experiment. And I think with electric buses, when there will be no emission, it's much easier to build the housing near the bus depot, because earlier the conventional buses, people don't want to live near the bus depot, and generally these bus depot used to be outside of the city because of these problems with the noise. But now you can do much. I mean, there is no maintenance. You don't need to do much of maintenance in the electric buses, except the body part. But yeah, I think it makes much more sense. And I love what you said about how the constraint bring innovation and force you to rethink what you are doing and what is required and all. Now I would like to discuss about this corporate venture capital side of RATP. A lot of people don't know that RATP has a corporate venture capital firm, which is RATP Capital Innovation, which is investing in sustainable mobility, urban real estate, last mile logistic startup. And the fund has so far invested in 7 startups and has more than $30 million under management. So how does innovation department work with RATP Capital Innovation, and how do you decide which sector or startup the group should invest? What kind of things you look before making investment in any company?
RATP Capital Innovation is a dedicated company, one of the subsidiary, mainly for administrative reasons. We have regular exchanges between the two teams on the startups. We share, we all speak to startups, so we need to be synchronized. So we have regular exchange. We look at the technology, the interest, the use cases. Do we think that there are some values? We source startups together. For example, we partner the European Startup Prize for Mobility, which is a prize that is under the patronage of the European Parliament, and that every year brings together the best startups in Europe on mobility and city management, city experience. and we clearly, we do that together. We share all that, and then once we have, we clearly see the strengths and of the different startups we have. Then at some point we start aligning that with the group strategy. Where is the group today and where it wants to go in the next years? And at the end, the final decisions are taken by the COMEX members on finance, strategy, and development. So the beginning of the process is really classic, and at the end, it's each time it's a specific case. We're not professional investor, so we invest on things that are really correlated to our strategy and the way we develop on the world.
Yeah, I mean, I actually agree with your point. Like, okay, you're not the professional investor, but actually you are the client. So you know what technology and what innovation is required in the long term. Because sometimes the investor just bet on different startup, believing that it will work, it will not work. But to be on the other side, the RATP is a client also for these startup. So as a client, you know which innovation will.
Yeah, we usually don't invest in startups where we are directly clients. We're more looking at partners, things that are complementary to us than direct clients. I won't say it's it's a rule, and we will never do that. As I said, each case is a little bit different. But yeah, the idea is more to make partners allows the ecosystem to grow than investing in direct partners. It can happen that, like we said, we want to buy this company because we think it's pretty nice, but then we do that with direct investments, not using
the capital. Interesting. No, thanks for sharing that point. I was not aware, so it's a good strategy. So you don't want to have any conflict or any other issues. So keeping it two things separate. So looking more partner rather than just as a supplier. That's great. Thanks for sharing. Now, in your role, you must be meeting many founders who are building startup in the mobility and logistic area. Sometimes it's difficult to decide which idea will work and which will not work. Like you mentioned, getting 200 entries and selecting only 15. It's a difficult task. So I have two questions. Is like, one, what are your evaluation criteria to find the next good startup or next unicorn or next big technology company? And what is your advice to the founder and startup in mobility sector based on your experience so far? What you feel they should do or they shouldn't do when they are working in this area?
So I'm not trying to find the next unicorn. That's too difficult. When I meet a founder, when I meet startups, I'm looking at a few different things. First one is I'm looking at the use case. Is it realistic for me or for someone else? I mean, it can be for someone else, but what is the probability that there is a real problem and that the solutions the problems they're trying to crack is a real problem? The second thing I'm looking at is the technology. Is it working? And can it scale? It can work on a bench, in a lab, or on the startup desks. The question is, can it scale? So is there any regulation issue or how can it deploy? And the third thing is anyone willing to pay? Because at some point, startup, it's a company, you need to earn money. Solutions can be brilliant. Problem can be real, but if no one wants to buy it, then you won't make any money on that. And it's one of the biggest cuts when you look at the pipe of the startups. It's use case is real. Okay, technology is working. Okay, does anyone wants to pay for it? No. Too bad. The last thing is the team, the founder vision and the team around it. Sometimes when the startup starts, the problem is not the good one, or the technology is okay, but not revolutionary. And finally, no one wants to pay for it.
Yeah.
But if the team is good, then they can try to change a little bit progressively once they learn what's the real problem, who is willing to pay for that, and that's a question of the quality of the team. If the team is good, if they're motivated, then they can make the modifications that are needed to make the startup successful. Otherwise, if the team is like too narrow-minded on their initial view and not able to listen to people, then it probably won't work.
Yeah, no, I like what you mentioned about that everything can work if team is good. Nothing will work if team is bad, because if they are narrow-minded, they are not listening to the partner or investors or client, I mean, nothing will work. And that's what happened. A lot of these startups fail because they keep their mindset to a narrow product and they don't want to change. And in fact, I spoke to one of the venture capitalists who is investing in mobility startup, and that's what he said. The team play a big role in any investment. Otherwise, the whole product and idea will be gone very soon.
Yeah, and I mean, for me, almost the main thing is, do you have the impression that the team loves to work together?
Oh yeah.
If there is the good casting and they love to work together, they can crack whatever problems they have.
Oh, yeah.
But if they don't love that, then first problem, it won't work.
Yeah. I mean, if they are not sticking together, so that's a perfect recipe for the failure. Sooner or later, they will there will be some cracks, and the whole thing will fall apart. Now, shifting a gear a bit, one of the key things which is going to happen in Paris is the Summer Olympics. So Summer Olympic will be in Paris in 2024. So we are just around 720 days around, or even less. And RATP is a mobility partner of Olympic 2024, and this will be the first game fully aligned with the climate goal. In fact, the Paris city promised that 100% of spectators will travel by public transport during the games, so that they can drastically reduce the total carbon footprint for the game. So it's a big event for Paris, and I think for RATP Group, because you will be kind of managing the whole mobility for the city. And RATP is already planning to launch some futuristic projects, including autonomous electric vehicle, urban air mobility, and many other. So I'm curious to learn about some of these projects and how RATP is preparing for the game. What kind of pressure at innovation department is there? Like, you need to showcase some of the big innovation at this game.
So we're deeply involved in the Olympics, but we're not a partner in the Olympic terms. In Paris, there are several operators. We're one of them, but we're not the only operators around. So we have a huge coordination efforts to do with Île-de-France Mobility, which is the organizing authority for all Île-de-France. But clearly, if you look at where the Olympic sites are deployed, we will be clearly very concerned. We have a dedicated program manager just for the Olympics, dealing with a lot of problems. And clearly, innovation it's almost the easiest one. And so if you look at more on innovations, yeah, clearly we're preparing some projects on urban air mobility with an experimental service between Le Bourget Airport, which is one of the airports in Paris, and 1 or 2 points in Paris, trying to showcase really this urban air mobility. We are also preparing experiments with autonomous buses, and also with hydrogen buses. We probably will have a full hydrogen line for the Olympics.
Okay.
And we also prepare to receive the world. So we recently completed the first deployment of an AI that we developed that allows to translate instantly in several languages what RATP agents are saying on mics. You know, we have classic situations where we have pre-recorded messages in different languages, but you know, you have this exploitation hazard, and in that case, then it's a RATP agent that takes the mic and speaks in French, and then only the French people understand, and a few others, but you miss a lot of people. Yeah. So we developed this AI. It's now able to instantly translate in English and German, and we deployed that on 3 lines. And we did that really recently, a few months ago. And the target is the Olympic. Is for the Olympic, we want to have deployed that on all on the complete network and in the languages of the Olympics. So the 5 languages of the Olympics. So we still have 2 years, but okay, it's still a little bit. We need to. We cannot rest on this subject if we want to be on time for the Olympics. But clearly, it's one of the innovations that will be here for real.
Well, that's quite interesting. Real time. I remember recently Meta was doing like Facebook was doing something similar, but they were doing more for the text, not for the speech and all. So it'll be quite interesting, a real time translation.
And one of the things that we had to do is to train AI with all the names of the stations and all the expressions that we use.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the AI was translating, you know, a little bit stupidly at the beginning.
Yeah.
And yeah, we had a lot of work retraining the AI to be able to adapt to
the emotion.
Network. Yeah.
And also adding the emotions and like if there is some humor and then you want to add a little bit of humor in the other languages too. So it's a challenging task. No, great. In fact, next question, you know, which you mentioned earlier about that RATP vision about introducing robots for the industrial side. And I must say that RATP is among the very few agencies in the world which are using drones and robots in the daily operation and maintenance activity. In November 2021, RATP infrastructure team added Percival, the dog robot developed by the Boston Dynamic, and then RATP infrastructure arm inducted the LEOs 2 drone developed by the Flyability in the Paris Metro to perform inspection of elevated asset using computer vision and AI and all. What do you see the future maintenance facility will look like by adding these kind of robots, drone, and these kind of facility? And how can these new technology enable the operator to improve efficiency? Because I think, like you mentioned, it should solve some real problems. So what kind of problem these technologies are solving? And my last point is, because I know in Paris and Europe, the union is very strong. So did you face any resistance from the workshop staff when they see these robots are walking along with them and doing some work?
So on this topic, we're not focusing on improving efficiency. We focus on improving the quality of life of our agents. As I said, we operate underground. Some places are like really nightmares to inspect. For example, when you have to do inspections under platforms, it's very, very tiny. It's today some places people need to crawl on their knees to be able to perform inspections. Or in other places, we have very elevated ceilings of metro tunnels, and then you need to have people that climbs on things. It's, you know, it takes time. It's painful. It can generate accidents. So already was to say, okay, we need to try to find new solutions for that. One of the big challenges we had is nothing is flat, and we needed to have. Trying robots is not something new at RATP. We started to use robots in the 90s, in the beginning of the century, but it was a lot of robots that were on wheels. And the problem is that nothing is flat. Trucks are not flat, and you have cables everywhere. So it was too difficult to do. So there was some experiment in that, and it was just killed. And what we really have found now is that the technology of drones and the technology of robots that can walk are now mature enough so that we can use them operationally. And then you can send those drones or those robots in places that are difficult for people to access.
Yeah.
And if you do that, you still need some people to pilot the drone or guide the robots and to analyze the collected data and add their expertise and their experience on what is the real problem and what kind of work you need to do to solve the problem before it's becoming bigger and bigger. So it means that that's why we don't have any resistance from the people, because in fact we are helping them solve their problem. Of course, we have efficiency gains, but it's not the initial intentions. The initial intention is remove the places that are so painful. You don't go, or you go, you don't want to go. And once doing that, we can solve the real problem. And once the agents have the tools in their hand, then they start using it everywhere.
Yeah.
So and then you can at the end have some gains on productivity, but that's not the initial concern. We do that by trying to having a better quality of life for agents.
Yeah, like in the beginning, you mentioned your role is to help others. So with these projects, the idea is how to help these maintenance staff or operators. And then by helping others, you gain some efficiency and opportunity to meet some other goal. But the ultimate idea is that how to make their job much easier and faster. Like I like your point, what you mentioned about these technicians. Now they have these cameras and they can see with these camera, and they can get some assistance from the computer, but they can also use their own experience and find out whether there is a problem or whether it can be useful. No, that's great. And I think that should be the motive always. It's how to help to make people's job easier rather than thinking about replacing them. I love that point. Now, you mentioned about that the decarbonizing the city is one of the key goals for RATP, and RATP Group is investing heavily in electric buses. And I would say it's being one of the largest international operators that you're inducting electric buses from different manufacturers and managing different technologies like opportunity charge, fast charge, slow charging in different countries. So my question is, which technology, according to you, will survive in the long run? Because there are so many technologies now, wireless charging, induction charging, opportunity charge. Which technology you think will survive in the long run? And one of the key challenge for big organization is how to share knowledge across different geographies. RATP Group is working in 14 countries around the globe. So how do you make sure that some of the learning you have from one country can go to another? And just to add one more point to this question is what type of system you use to manage your fleet and charging infrastructure? Are you developing any kind of in-house IT system or platform to manage these fleets? Because it's a big change. And I think for the operator like RATP, it must be a big project.
Today, the two most advanced cities are London and Paris. For them, we have a strategy on 100% clean buses made with TfL in London and Île-de-France Mobilité in Paris. And that's a total of 5,700 buses. That's huge.
Yeah.
And it will be a mix of bio CNG and electric buses. And what we see is we clearly focus on slow charging at night. That's really adapted to buses. It's clearly different when you have a car, an electric car, or other kind of electric vehicles. But buses, usually at night, they sleep. You can charge them. And today, the autonomy of buses are enough to complete a day of exploitation.
Yeah.
So we have a few fast charging systems, for hazards. And in some cases, you need to have, I have this bus, I need to fill it very quickly. But it's clearly a minority. It's more like the vast majority is slow charging during the night. and we perform that a little bit. We look at opportunity charging. The fact is it's a nightmare in terms of infrastructure in the city, and in some places it's impossible to deploy due to heritage regulations. In Paris, you're very quickly in a heritage perimeter, and adding this kind of things, it's very complex. It's almost impossible. So it's costly. So you need to have really good reasons to do that. I would not say it's never happening, but clearly it's not the focus we have. It will be more complex things. Today we see more and more cities, smaller cities, that comes to us saying, okay, we want to shift our buses to green fleets. And what we do is with a pool of experts, we can send them to say, okay, how do you define the strategy? What is the best mix between bio-CNG, electric, hydrogen? What do you want to do? Because lots of cities, when they start the questions, they have no idea of the differences, the costs, the drawback and advantages of each of the solutions. And there is no bullet solutions. There is no magic bullets. It's not one solution that fits all. Each city has you need to find a good mix for each city. So we help them to do that. And then there are two cases. Either we are already the operator of the city, then we use those experts to train the local teams and to be able to start the transition, and then we are providing them support so that if they have questions, then of course we can add them. And in some cities we're not at all the local operator, but the city know that we already have done that several times, and so they come to us to help them define the strategy, and depending on the cases, challenging their local operators or helping the local operators to do the thing, because it's not that easy to do, especially if you want to do it on a full city. For a city, it's a risk to be able to complete this transition, and at the same time, now they see that they don't have a choice. They need to remove their diesel buses or old stuff and bring new one, and they need to do that in an environment when economic constraints for cities is a reality. So making this transition by mastering the industrial part, the adaptations that you need to do, the consequences on exploitation, on maintenance, and keeping the budget, it's something which is really tough to do all in the same time. So we're clearly here to help cities to do that, by sharing the experience we have in London and in Paris, and we'll see clearly more and more cities that do that. On the tools we have to manage the fleets, it's a mix between systems made by manufacturers, like when you buy an electric bus, you have some software that comes with it. It's the same thing for the charging station, and at some points there are some homemade components on top of that to be able to manage everything. Clearly, it's a place where we can do lots of. It's changing very quickly, and we can do lots of innovation on those things. But this is only the beginning. I mean, making buses electrics makes something. It's a clear shift on the ecosystem. In fact, you start looking at the digital transformation of the energy sector. This is completely different from what we have on classic diesel. And new competencies, it's new profile, everything is new. So it's you have a white page and we try to write something, and sometimes you just erase and start again.
No, I agree with you. It's like creating new job and new opportunity. In fact, I met one startup which is doing work on battery analytics, and their role is that when you have a full fleet of, let's say, 5,000 electric buses, now how do you take care of battery health? which battery need what kind of charging strategy, and how to optimize their state of charge and all those kind of stuff. So, and nobody thought about these kind of companies or these kind of tools earlier, but it's emerging. So it's like a white slate, and you are creating new tools. The another new transition happening is the hydrogen and fuel cell technology. And you mentioned that RATP Group is very bullish about this technology. You will have one line at Olympics, which will be hydrogen. But my point is hydrogen is still evolving. Like you mentioned, biogas and electric vehicle, they are much more advanced and much more proven. Even though many countries are bullish, they want to become the future hub for hydrogen energy. What is your view on hydrogen? And my question is why you are bullish about hydrogen technology. When do you think we can see the mass adoption of hydrogen buses or fleet or vehicles? Because I spoke to many experts and they still feel it's 5 to 10 years away.
So clearly hydrogen is in the middle of a hype peak.
Yeah.
You know, technology will do everything, including coffee. However, if you start to look at it a little bit more seriously, saying, okay, what are the use cases? What is the technology maturity? Is anyone wanting to pay for that? You can see that it's possible to answer yes to all those three questions on some specific parts of the use cases.
Yeah.
The two use cases we found interesting are the places where electric buses are no longer working. For example, 18-meter buses. 18-meter buses, electric 18-meter buses, you need opportunity charging to exploit them. It's complicated, it's very costly. In the same time, 18-meter hydrogen buses, it's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
There is another case, which is small minibuses in suburban area going from town to town. Those buses, they are already using 300, 400 kilometers a day. It's too much for batteries, and since it's minibuses, you cannot put too many batteries on them. So on those cases, hydrogen is great because it has no emissions except water, very long autonomy, charging in 15 minutes. So that makes them really interesting for that. I'm pretty sure it won't replace electric buses. You know, it's, as I said, it's a question of mix. If you look at the city, if you look at how the territory is done, what are the lengths of the lines? How many people do you move? How many 18-meter buses do you have, and how many minibuses do you have? There is a place for hydrogen. It's not a big place, it's a small place, but this place exists. And we clearly see that the vehicles that are coming today. We had a first a bus in productions today in La Roche-sur-Yon in France. Okay. And the hydrogens comes directly from wind energy fields that is nearby. So you clearly need to have green hydrogen, otherwise there is no case at all. And we will have a complete bus line for the Olympics here in Ile-de-France. But that, you know, on that things, public transport is trying to bootstrap an ecosystem for mobility. And for me, there are two factors that will make the success and the mass adoption of hydrogen or not.
Yeah.
The first one is trucks. How trucks are going to adopt hydrogen. Electric trucks is something really complicated. And hydrogen is really adapted to heavy mobility, trucks, boats. That's the good case for them. Buses, you are in the really line, and the lower line.
Yeah.
And if trucks are going for it, then clearly you will have mass adoption. And the second thing is, what's the price of green hydrogen?
Yeah.
Because at the end, the objective of hydrogen is making things decarbonize. So if you're not using green hydrogen, then it's no case. And today, green hydrogen is still very expensive compared to not green hydrogen. Yeah. But if you look at the increase of prices of gas recently, then yields the price of hydrogen is not that far from being even with the price of gas or with the price of gas. So it's probably a good candidate to go further than bio-CNG on places, because even if bio-CNG it's emitting less pollution than diesel bus, it still emits some pollutions.
Oh,
so
yeah.
hydrogen emits only water, so it's perfect for that. So it's more a long-term things, 5 years, 10 years, and clearly the question of what's the price of hydrogen will be, and what are the trucks going for that. If those two are going in a good direction, then clearly it will develop. Otherwise, it will stay niche on the public transport ecosystem.
I love your analysis. First, the 18-meter and small buses, because there is a restriction how many battery you can put on the vehicle, so it make perfect case. And secondly, the price and the trucks, because the truck is a huge number, and the moment the trucks start using hydrogen or converting into hydrogen, it's give that economy of scale, like we achieve in electric buses, because there are so many buses all around, so you can use it. And I think you rightly mentioned, it's like once we have some success in these two parameters, reducing the price or making it some price parity, and secondly, commercial adoption of hydrogen, then we will see more and more these vehicles coming. No, I agree with you. It will be complementary to electric.
On hydrogen, we had something which is small, but which is nice. You can also use hydrogen not on mobility, on static use case. And we replace some diesel-based power generators on our building sites by hydrogen-based power generator. And it means no emissions and no noise. So the neighborhood they love that. They don't want that we come back to diesel. A building sign is always making noise, but if you can reduce that, then you're improving the quality of life for citizens around. And when you do a lot of constructions and building stuff, that's something important for people to accept the transformation you're doing in the city.
Oh yeah. No, it's the customer, or the people buy-in very important when you're implementing a new technology, a new solution. If it's making their life better, or it's adding some other problem in their life. So the hydrogen genset, I think definitely is people most love it, because no noise, no pollution. It can be closer to your house, and you can get unlimited energy wherever you need by switching it on. It's not cheap, but
not that unlimited. But clearly it's no noise, no emissions, and that's already something really nice.
Make it big impactful. Now, I want to talk about this point which you mentioned about the use of AI, and I think use of AI is growing in every sector, including in public transport. You mentioned that how you're using AI for language translation, for your vehicle inspection or track inspection. So, I mean, AI can help to unlock the value of data to improve the quality and efficiency in public transport sector. How do you see the use of AI in different function for transit agency? You mentioned about a couple of use cases, but what are the other cases or some example you want to share where RATP is very aggressively using AI to improve the efficiency, or I would say also help the transit operator and the workers?
AI is something that can help all parts of an organizations. As soon as you have data and people ready to use it. So we have strategic program on AI that tries to cover all the spectrum of what we do here at RATP. So going from helping our customers, or maintenance, or industry, or even what we call support function, finance and human resources. To give you a few examples, so I mentioned the AI that performs translations. We have a lot of AI for predictive maintenance on trains, on trucks, on whatever you can do maintenance on. It's really a powerful tool. The question is, you need to craft each time the good sets between the sensors and the AI. And there's a big question on, are you making sensors on the train, or are you or are you making sensors on the tracks? And what are you looking at? And sometimes it's more interesting to get sensor on the train that look at the tracks, or sensors on the tracks that look at the trains, than having sensors on the track for the track or the train for the train. So
interesting.
You need to do that, and because sensors can cost a lot. Once you have made that, then you can look at what kind of use cases are interesting, and where do your AI bring the best value for your money. We have also we have a lot of cameras, and so we look to what we can do with cameras and AI, and you can do amazing things as long as you respect people's privacy. But for example, we had an experiment where we just measure the way people are, the density of people on the platform, and helping them, saying, okay, lots of people are, please go there, then you will have better comfort for your travel. And that works, and you don't track anyone, you don't recognize anyone. It's just, counting people. And that's worked quite well. And we have a lot more and more AI working on this kind of things. We also have AI that helps you on safety. For example, we have anti-collision system for tramways that has been developed, because sometimes you can, trams are very bad at braking. And inside of cities, this is so complex environment. You can have people going from anywhere, and people and bikes and scooters and cars and buses and whatever. And in some places we have big collisions problems, and anything that can help us anticipate this kind of things and helps the driver to look at something that he didn't have seen, or he could seen but a little bit later. If we can help him anticipate, then that's way better. We're working also on an AI that detects people that stay on trains after service. People that fall asleep or stay on train and forget to get out, and that finish on the service tracks, and then you need to send some guys to just get the people out of the train and bring them back to the station. So this is the kind of thing. It's it's, if you can say, oh wait, there is someone still on the train, that's something that can clearly help the people themselves and the exploitation, because it's less hard on the exploitation. So that's a few examples, but the possibility of AIs are very, very big. We're just at the beginning of exploring all those. The question is, how do you make the goods, the good value for the good money you have, and not. It's easy to craft huge projects of AI that cost a lot, that bring only very few value. So the question is really the balance between the sensors, the AI you develop, and the value you generate. But if you really look at the project like this, then there is a lot of things to do.
And like this idea about using AI to check whether anybody left in the train or not, because I remember in some of the agencies, they have a person who go from front to bottom, just to check if there is anybody sitting or sleeping inside the train, and they need to take out. So it's a cost. So probably you can do much efficiently and much faster, because then you don't need to stop. You can just check within 5 seconds, is any object or anything left in the train, and you can do. I mean, it's a small function, but it can bring a lot of efficiency to turn around. No, thanks for sharing. I really love, like you mentioned, it can be used everywhere, but you need to balance the value and the cost, and does it really bring a real value on the plate? Now, During the pandemic, one of the key challenge for transit operator was the ticketing and payment, because many of the city were using physical ticket and all. And what we seen after this pandemic, there was a greater push for contactless ticketing. How did the ticketing change in the Paris region? What are your view on some of these emerging technology like open loop payment system, mobile ticketing, be in, be out? People don't need to take out anything, and the mobile phone can calculate everything. Or biometric ticketing, like you mentioned, that the camera can be very good use. So using people facial recognition as a ticketing and all. What are these technology you feel will be the future, or at RATP you are experimenting with some of these technology?
So ticketing now it's managed by Île-de-France Mobilité in Paris. So we work with them, and COVID was clearly something we accelerate the deployment of SMS payments on mobile, especially in buses. And with them we recently started the process of completely removing the paper tickets, going only on cards. And so clearly that's huge evolution, and the crisis made them accelerate. But it's something that, it's more or less more than an acceleration. Not, I would say it was not triggered by the crisis. So in Paris, it's clearly the France Mobility is defining the roadmap, and we work with them to do it, but it's really them that are making the innovation process on that. On this question of ticketing, we innovate more in other cities. For example, in Brest, which is in the west of France, in Brittany, we're testing a connected ring that allows you to take the bus and trams, and allows you also to pay as a smart card. It's a ring you have on your finger, and with that you just use it as a card. So we're testing this kind of new use case. How can you do the ticketing differently than with a card? And it's clearly something interesting. We also look at BIBO and technologies like that, but clearly it's still tricky in some cases. The concept is really interesting, but you have some cases where the system is not working exactly as it should do, for lots of reasons, because at some places you lost a connection, or at some point the smartphones reboot for whatever reason, or and the question is, how do you manage those cases? And that's failure management is really tricky, it's really complex. So the idea is really good. When everything works fine, it's very efficient. But when it's not working fine, then you start to have an open field of how do you deal with those cases, and it's lots of different cases. So that's a tricky one. The question is, with the Ukraine crisis, we see more and more people, and the climate change aspect, we see more and more countries going on more, not trying to do that, trying to say, okay, let's look at Germany, what Germany did. €9 ticket for everything. And so it makes people's lives so simple. So perhaps on this ticketing subject, the solution is not a technological solution. It's perhaps a regulation, or simplicity of use for people. It's probably that's the good solution. On biometrics, we clearly see that it must be culturally accepted, and it's illegal in lots, at least in Europe. It's totally illegal. Some other countries in the world are agreed to do that, but this should be culturally accepted, and for now on we don't do this kind of thing. We think it perhaps not the way we would like the society to go on. Clearly the technology works, but the question is not a question of technology, it's a question of, do we want to have that? And some countries will answer yes, and some countries will answer no. And it's a question of whether the countries wants to do it or not. more than that thing. And today we're the countries we are today tends not to want to do that. So
it doesn't make sense.
No, it doesn't make that much sense.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. It's like biometric ticketing, there is a lot of buzzword about it, but at the same time, we don't see too much of adoption. So customers are not comfortable. So there are like some Asian country in Japan, in China, in Moscow also, they implemented this facial recognition, but I didn't see too much of adoption from people because they are not comfortable. But I love this connected ring concept. I would love to see more detail about that and share in the show note, because it's interesting. So when you meet somebody, you can exchange ring and give them a public transit card rather than giving something else. So it's exchanging wow to use public transport more and more. Now, follow up to my previous question about ticketing, the other aspect is MaaS, mobility as a service. So it started as a buzzword couple of year, and then there was a lot of hype, but we don't see any major success story. Any work, RATP, or any work you're exploring in MaaS area, and you think it will work, or you think it will not work? Like, any perspective you have on MaaS?
So MaaS is clearly the kind of innovation that gets out of the hype. Like 3 years ago, MaaS was the
everything,
doing everything, including coffee. And what's interesting with innovations that went out of the hype phase, that's the place where you're learning the real use cases, you're learning the real value. What does it really brings to people?
Yeah.
And so we have our MaaS applications. It's called Bonjour RATP, and it's working here in Paris. Okay. And we working with MAPI, which is one of the French company that was working on this kind of subjects for a long time. And so today the applications is live, and you have, of course, public transport. You also have PTC, bikes, e-scooters, and we made a choice that is we want full integration. That is, especially the payments and okay. the ticketing phase, because you see some of the MaaS applications around the globe. You have the availability of bikes, for example, then you click and then it sends you to another app, and you need to create an account and introduce your credit cards element, and you don't do it. Yeah. And we choose to say, okay, we want to have perhaps less partners, but integrated ones. And so today you can use it. You want to have a bike on e-scooter. You click and it's done in seconds, and you don't have to create a new account, and you don't have to do that. So today the application is live, and we have very good rates on the stores. We have more and more people using it, so it's perhaps a little bit early to get a real conclusion on what the benefits are, since it's only a 1 year. Okay. But clearly, it's very encouraging, and we clearly see that that's something promising for the future, and to develop in other cities in the world.
Well, that's great. So it's like you are experimenting with it, and you're getting good response, so which is good. Like, if user like it, and I agree with your point. If you don't have fully integrated services, people will not use it. Like, if you need to go to another app and download it, or create a new account, add credit card. So it's kind of adding multiple steps. You have to make it seamless, like click, book it, and start using it and all. No, great to see that you're doing, and I would love to know more in coming days, how you evaluate and what kind of result you get with this MaaS application, and see how you want to expand across the globe in other countries as well. The other key innovation we are seeing right now is about this micromobility. And in fact, Paris is emerging as a hotbed for innovation in micromobility space. There are many companies which are choosing to locate in Paris. And I think the reason is in Paris, you have a high urban density, you have very excellent infrastructure, and then also the support from the transit operator and authorities is great. In fact, RATP Capital Innovation invested in electric scooter company City Scoots. How do you think this micro mobility will reshape our city? Because a lot of people think that they will compete with public transport or they will take away passenger for public transport. And any lesson from RATP experience with micro mobility, how one should work with these new innovation?
So the micro mobility that is now reshaping our cities is bike.
Yeah.
And the COVID crisis just make a huge acceleration on that. And we see cities trying to changing the affectation of public space for micromobility and especially for bikes. The question of whether it's taking people from the public transport depends really on the way this space allocation is done. If you add those micromobility on bus lines, or if you make them interfere and reducing the bus speed, for example, then clearly you will have a bad cycle. You know, you're reducing the bus speed, so buses are not efficient. So people think that they will be faster with bikes, so they take bikes. So you have more bikes. So you still the more bikes you have, the more and more you're reducing the bus speed, and then you're doomed.
Yeah.
But if you said, okay, let's share space in an effective way, that is, micromobility need their space and buses need their space, and if you make them, you can make them ally and not competing with each other. The real competitions we need to face is carbonized cars today. That's the thing that is making pollutions, making CO2 emissions, and taking too many public space for the number of people it's transporting. And on that, micromobility and public transport are objective allies and need to work that way. The limits with micromobility is it's really true in density centers. You mentioned there are lots of companies that are in Paris. The very funny thing is, look at how many of them are in the next cities close to Paris. You know, Paris is very small cities in terms of occupied space. So if you look at all the rest of the Île-de-France, then you have still a very dense area that is Paris plus the first line of suburb, and lots of micromobilities, they just stop to Paris, and you need to have them go further. But the further you go, the less density there is, and the more and more cars you have, because people don't have any other choices than doing that. So the micromobility, they need to be today the challenge for micromobility and also for public transport is to go in those second, third layers of suburbs where today you almost have no other choices than cars and a few trains, and to create new solutions for that. And on those places, here again, it's micromobility and public transport are allies. And it's one of the things we're testing today. We're testing autonomous mobility in Saint-Rémy-lès-Chevreuse. Saint-Rémy-lès-Chevreuse is the last station of the train line. It's very far in the south of Paris. Okay. And on those places, you don't have any other choices than taking a car to go to the station. And we try to, with autonomous vehicles, we try to create new services for that. And here again, you need to create infrastructures to secure the use of micromobility, so that people can take the bikes to do 3 kilometers to go to the station, to the train station. Yeah. And today in those places, if you want to take your bikes, you're in the middle of cars that goes at 70 kilometers per hour. It's you need to be very sure and not be afraid at all to take a bike in those situations. And if you don't work for those people, then clearly we will lose the battle of decarbonizing the mobility. The question of micromobility is not the city centers. It's those places where you just have car and nothing else.
Yeah, I mean, playing a role of a last mile function, because that's how they started that the micromobility can cover the first and last mile. And you rightly mentioned in a lot of these suburb area, people need to drive. I know in my neighborhood, everybody take their car to the GO station and then take a train. But then you have a car just to cover the distance, and still you are emitting carbon. And probably if you have a better option like autonomous vehicle or these micromobility service everywhere, probably you will not take your car and you can take these scooters to cover 3-4 kilometer distance easily with the
and the
infrastructure.
parking at the train station is
Oh,
full at 8 a.m.
It's packed.
And you basically stack cars that don't do anything during all the day.
Oh yeah.
Clearly non-optimal at all.
We have a 5-story car station and parking station, and it's by, like you said, 8 o'clock it's packed and everybody take a train and go. But I mean, probably you don't need that space. You can use that space much efficiently by integrating scooters or bringing these autonomous fleet. Now, this is my last question. I think we have a lot of interesting point covered so far, but this question is very important because it's very relevant to your experience, which is cybersecurity. You work in this area, you studied in this area, so you have expertise in this field. And I would say cybersecurity is emerging as another big challenge for public transport operator, especially after this digitalization wave, because earlier we were not connected that much, but in last 4-5 years, we are seeing a lot of attacks happening, cyber attacks happening on this, the transit agencies around the world, especially in North America. There were some news where the system were hacked. So as an expert in this area, how do you think public transport operator can be ready to face these future cyber threat? Because I think this will increase. It will not slow down here or stop here. It will continue to increase. And if you can share some of the good practices followed at RATP Group to make sure the system is secure for any external threats. And when you're working in 14 countries, you can't make it foolproof, but how you make sure that it can withhold those kind of attacks.
Yeah, no one can really say it's ready for cyber. You know, on cyber, the question is not will I be attacked? It's when.
Yeah.
And so I'm not in charge of cyber. I have a colleague that is dealing with that. But clearly, even on the innovation projects, we managed, for example, I mentioned autonomous vehicles. We had cyber checks on all the autonomous vehicles we use, and it's clearly one of the on the safety model, we were looking at these elements. Is it possible to take control of the vehicle and on distance? Yeah. But otherwise, you can have lots of problems on the ticketing systems or on the systems that follow the buses, that know where every buses are, or on the metro systems. So clearly, each type of systems, you need to have this cyber assessment, analysis, and response. And in France, the good thing is that we have a very, very good national agency for cyber defense that is supporting companies in order to have the good practice, how to make them in place, how to have the good governance. How do you make people understand the risks? And then what are the good solutions to be able to put in place so that you can reduce that risk and try to master it? It's you know, it's really, you need to be really, really humble when you're speaking about cyber. It's a very, very difficult subject. One of the things which is still very difficult to do is when you do in the same time safety analysis and a cybersecurity analysis. You know, the safety experts, they tend to look, they have some models, very now very classic, very well known, and they use they consider risks with probability. And when you're working on cyber, you usually don't know how to quantify the probabilities, and your attacker is adaptive. It means if you close the door, it will go through the window. So that's very difficult to make the two of them work together. It's something which is still a challenge. It's a challenge that is true for all industrial activities where you have this kind of subjects. And That's a tough one, but we're clearly working on it with the help of the national authority, and what like on buses, what we learn here in Paris, we replicate throughout the world.
Oh, that's great. No, I agree with you. It's very hard to predict when the next attack will be, and there are, like, even if you close the door, there are so many windows are open, and when you have so many users, you don't know which system can be vulnerable to these attack, and how to prevent these attack, and it's hard to predict because the way we are connected, we don't know what can happen tomorrow and how system will crack. Now, we discussed about transit, we discussed about technology and mobility trend and all. Now it's time to learn a little more about you. And to do that, we have this rapid fire question round. And generally we ask these 5 questions. It's a short one. And we ask our guests to answer them quickly so that we learn about who they are really behind their role, day-to-day job. So if you're ready, I'll start these 5 questions.
Go on.
Okay. So my first question is, if you were not in the security or transit sector, technology sector, what other profession you would have selected?
I probably would have become a musician.
Musician?
Yeah, I performed a lot when I was young and still trying to do a little bit. And one of the things I love is making music together with people, not by my own. It's really a question of how you create a group of people, and you try to produce together something that is better than each of what each people can do by itself.
And probably in future you'll bring some AI feature for the music generation and all. and it'll be interesting, yeah. Now you have traveled around the world. You have been to different cities and all. Which is your favorite city in the world?
I think I will say Paris. I mean, I love cities like Berlin or Vancouver, but still Paris is a very great place to live and work.
Yeah, I mean, Vancouver is my favorite too, but Paris is my favorite too. I've been there, and it's a lovely city. But now next question can be a little bit tricky. It's like, which city has the best transit network in the world?
So for this one, I'm required to say Paris. No, you know, the question is, what do you mean by best?
Yeah.
A transit network, it should be adapted to the city, to the people that live there. The best transit network is the network that serve the citizens and the city activities. And so clearly Paris it's amazing, but it's not the only one. London is amazing. Tokyo is amazing. One is really impressive for me is Wien in Austria.
Okay.
It's a smaller city, but they have a really good approach on how to integrate inside of the city, and perhaps because they're a little bit smaller, they can do things faster than what we can do in bigger cities where everything is so complex. So clearly, Wien is a very interesting case.
No, I love your answer is saying the best should adopt to the city. In some city, probably it can be very simple. It doesn't need to be having multiple modes and all, but it's serving the city and citizen. It's best for people. I love your answer. Thanks for sharing that. Which is your favorite startup in the mobility sector?
That's a tough one. I would say Zenpark.
Zenpark.
It's a startup that allows to share your parking space real time, and I mean it's a so great solution. It's so useful, and in the same time, when you discuss with them, they have a vision of the future of cities, which is amazing. How do we convert all these parkings that we built for years now? We have all these assets. How can we use them to do something different? And that's almost not a mobility company. You know, their assets are concrete. You know, it's parking space. But in the same time, they're transforming the way mobility is done in cities from outside of the mobility sector. I love that. I love this, the ability to go through sectors.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. It's sometimes there is some of these external innovation have more impact on the sector rather than trying to reinvent something from inside. Now, my last question is, if you can change one thing in life, what would it be?
If we can reduce the carbon footprint of mobility.
Yeah.
That's, you know, it's 30% of what we have today, so if we reduce that at least by 2, I mean, we already made big progress for humanity and Earth.
Well, that's a great mission. And I think that's what pulled you also in this whole transit sector, your mission of this climate change and making mobility and people life more efficient. Now, thank you so much, Côme. I mean, thank you for sharing all your insight. I really love this conversation with you and learn a lot from your experience.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. We will be inviting some other inspiring guests in the coming week. You can subscribe to this podcast online to get the notification for the next episode. If you like this podcast, please don't forget to give us a 5-star rating, as it will help us to spread our message. If you have any feedback or suggestion for this podcast, please do write to us at info@mobility-innovators.com. I look forward to see you next time.